Thanks so much for joining us here on 90s Plus. I'm Chris Bianchi, joined by a 90s politics guy. I think that's your official title.
That's the official title.
Marshall Selinger. Thanks so much for joining us here, Marshall. So, coming up on Tuesday, the 28th of June, we have our primaries here in the state of Colorado. A lot to discuss here, but I guess top line, what are the big races to watch for?
Pretty much anybody with someone they're running against, not the unopposed races. And if you've looked at your ballot, a lot of your races that show up at home are unopposed because there's just the one candidate running. So, importance factor, I'd say U.S. Senate. That's the Ron Hanks versus Joe O'Dea for Republican candidate for U.S. Senate. You've got the governor's race, Congressional District 8, the brand new congressional district. You've got 4 Republicans running to be the Republican nominee. Secretary of State, no doubt, where there's 3 candidates. And then there's some, I hate to call them minor, but they're very isolated. So you've got a House District 6, which kind of encompasses Congress Park, Lowry, Hale, I think some of Uptown, Cheeseman Parks. This is kind of a central part of Denver where you've got 2 Democratic candidates, one being much more liberal than the other, and then that will dictate, where does the Democratic Party lie, at least from a state standpoint. And then one other race that I'm concentrating on is House District 51, which is in Loveland. You've got the House Minority Leader, Hugh McKean, being primaried from within. I mean, he's the top Republican in the House, and he faces a challenge. 2 races that are not in really our viewing area in terms of the Denver Metro and the mountains, Congressional District 3 and Congressional District 5. Congressional District 5 is Congressman Doug Lamborn facing a primary. He's got 3 other opponents. One is State Representative Dave Williams, who probably has the best chance of anybody who might knock off Lamborn, but that's El Paso County, Colorado Springs. And Congressional District 3, everybody is familiar with Congresswoman Lauren Boebert. She's facing a primary from State Senator Don Coram. That's on the far western slope. And when I say it's not in our viewing area, they have their own TV markets, so that's probably why you're not seeing political ads in those races, but they are contentious races too.
I guess top line, when it comes to the GOP side on the gubernatorial and Senate race, can you tell us a bit more about those races and what you expect to happen?
Let's start with the governor's race. I don't know, when you look at governor and Senate, I might say the Senate, it's probably going to be more, I think governor's more attractive because you can touch like a state race. Sometimes I even wonder if I can understand what goes on in Washington, D.C., in Congress and Senate. So let's look at the governor's race first. You've got Heidi Ganahl, the last Republican to have won a statewide race. She's a CU regent. You've got Greg Lopez, who we call former Parker mayor, but this was a lifetime ago. He was Parker mayor in the early 90s, and he was a Democrat at the time and switched to Republican while mayor. He finished 3rd running for governor as a Republican 4 years ago. There's no polling that I've seen, so I don't know who, you could say is the front runner. What I do know, I interviewed Heidi Ganahl immediately after she announced her candidacy last September, and that was the last interview we did with her. She tends to talk with conservative talk radio for interviews. I hear a lot of generalities. I've seen some of her debates and some of these interviews. They're themes, but no specifics about here's what I want to see happen and here's how I'm going to do it. There's a lot of here's what I want. I haven't seen the how. Greg Lopez is very clear about what he wants, and we've heard some very controversial things. I know we broke the news about his idea of changing the state voting system to an electoral college type outcome. So it really would take away one person, one vote, and say smaller counties that have greater voter turnout would have a bigger say than, let's say, the Denver metro area, which is a bigger area, but maybe our voter turnout isn't as, from a percentage standpoint, as much as the smaller counties. But Greg Lopez has said a number of things that show his position, but he hasn't defined, again, as governor, how you can do things. And I'll just say, and I'll shut up for a moment. As governor, there's the executive order powers we saw with Governor Polis during the pandemic. But you really are limited in what you can do because you need the legislature to pass bills that show up on your desk for you to enact new laws. Executive orders are kind of, here's something I want to see happen, here's something I'm going to push us toward, except in the pandemic. Then that's where the governor had some more like, you're going to stop doing this, we're going to close this. That doesn't happen outside of the emergency order. So I still, when you're thinking of who you're going to pick for governor, I would challenge you to ask your candidate, how are you going to do what you say you're going to do? If we want to talk briefly about, I'll try to be brief about the Senate. You've got Ron Hanks, who is very clear. We know what he stands for, that he is an election conspiracy theorist. He thinks elections should change wholeheartedly. He's not proven any election fraud, but he talks a lot about election fraud. I know he wants to change the method of voting to paper that has, drawing a blank, what's on money?
The thicker kind of paper. I know what.
Thick paper, and then it's got the, God, I feel like.
I know. I have it.
Someone's going to shout it out in the newsroom. Hologram type.
Hologram.
So stuff that you can things like that, which he has proposed at the state legislature. It's never gone anywhere. We know his stance on abortion is pro-life with no exceptions. His opponent, Joe O'Dea, businessman, is more toward the center on some of the topics like abortion. He is pro-life. Early in pregnancy, he's okay with an abortion, and then later, if it's in defense of the mother, if her life is at risk, he has some exceptions, but calls for a ban on late-term abortions, but we haven't heard from him. Late term is not an actual medical term, so we haven't heard from him. What does late term mean when you say it? Like, what month, what week, what are we talking about there? So again, that's another question I would challenge you to ask a candidate that you support. But that, again, being one of 100, you've got power in the Senate, but I struggle to sometimes figure out what one individual, like, name me something that, if you like Michael Bennet, what has Michael Bennet done that you can be like, this is why I vote for the guy, like, this is the one thing that I remember. I mean, it's not like he hasn't done stuff, but I just struggle to figure out, like, here's the one thing that somebody stands for after they've won the election.
Well, kind of position things a little bit. When it comes to the gubernatorial and the Senate races on the Republican side, is it safe to say that Hanks is further to the right of O'Dea and that Lopez would probably run further to the right of Ganal?
On the surface, I say yes. The thing is about Ganal, we don't clearly know. I've done reporting where I got tracker audio, meaning someone who opposes her and works for the other side, sent me audio of an event that she spoke at where she told the crowd that you probably want to hear me say more things about this topic, about election fraud perhaps, but what she said, I'm paraphrasing, that you're going to hear me say things that are more attractive to the unaffiliated voters, which says to me, to win the Republican primary, you have to get the Republican base, which currently many support the idea that something was funny in 2020, which again, there's been no proof of. So you have to walk this tightrope of appeasing that type of voter on the far fringes of your own party to make it out of the primary. But she's also not saying it publicly so that she doesn't have to walk it back if she is the candidate facing a Democratic Jared Polis in November. That's the issue. So I would say, yes, Lopez appears to be farther right to Ganal, but since we haven't heard so many specifics from Ganal, I can't say that for certain. Definitely for Ron Hanks, farther right than Joe O'Dea, which brings us to the ads. You're seeing a lot of ads for Lopez and for Lopez and Hanks saying that they are too conservative for Colorado. Do not be fooled by these ads. These ads are paid for by by Democrats in and out of the state. They want those candidates to be the Republican nominee come November because Democrats feel those types of candidates who have that type of position, a far-right position, would be easier to beat in a general election because primaries are only voted on locally by a member of that party, so people voting in the Republican primary are Republicans or unaffiliateds who choose to return the Republican ballot. Democrats, who are registered Democrats, cannot vote in the Republican primary. So, in the general election, the thinking is, well, when the Democrats have a say in whether they're going to choose that fringe candidate or not, they're definitely not going to pick that person. So don't be fooled by these ads. They are meddling by Democrats, trying to I'll call it a dog whistle. It's trying to get people who are super conservative to be like, wait a minute, that's my candidate. If they're telling me he's too conservative, that's the guy I want. These are not paid for by the person's opponent trying to be a negative ad toward Hanks or Lopez. As it's not Joe O'Dea saying Ron Hanks is too conservative, vote for me. It is Democrats saying Ron Hanks is too conservative. Hey, super conservatives, pay attention and vote for that guy. And oh, by the way, he's going to be easier for my guy to beat in November.
Is that not a big roll of the dice here by the Democrats? Because then you get a potential, whether or not you like Lauren Boebert, but a kind of more further to the right candidate in the general.
Is it a roll of the dice? Perhaps. Here's what I really think about it, and let's zoom. No, I'm just kidding. It's a dangerous game to play when you, as a Democrat, are all against what happened on January 6th, when you are against the idea that there was anything funny in the 2020 election, which again, there's been no proof that there was anything funny in the 2020 election. But for you to then support or try to pseudo-support that candidate thinking it's going to give you a better chance, you're giving that, if your intent is to give that candidate one extra step closer to the seat, as though that's going to be an easier method for your candidate to win, that is not just dangerous, I don't have a good word for it, but it's not cool.
Reckless, perhaps?
Yeah, I'll go with that. That's a good word, reckless.
Speaking of what we were just talking about a second ago, in that 3rd congressional district, former state senator Don Quorum running a pretty high-profile primary against Lauren Boebert. Is there any indication as to whether or not he has a chance to unseat her?
Again, no polling. I just off the cuff, I would say unlikely. Lauren Boebert in her district seems to be wildly popular. And if you think by calling her too conservative, I haven't seen these ads yet, but if you think that's a method that's going to get people to somehow vote for Don Quorum, or it's just not going to, like, it appears that the people who she represents agree with what she's doing. Again, I will challenge, even in that race, what has your candidate done for you? Ask that question. And I was doing some research. I don't think Lauren Boebert in the last 2 years has any legislation passed like 1 or 2 steps in the process. Maybe that's not what the voters in her district want or care about. But when you're voting someone to be your representative in Congress, I would hope, that they're doing stuff that gets legislation passed along the lines. Granted, she's in the minority since she's been there. She's only been there 2 years. I mean, you could look at previous congresspeople in Colorado who were the opposite party of the president or who were the opposite party of the party in charge, and we could probably argue, yeah, they didn't get stuff done either. But I don't think, I would be surprised. A big storyline on election night would be if Don Quorum beat Lauren Boebert, and I would be surprised if that happened.
Democratic side, is there anything to watch for there other than some of those House races you mentioned?
I mean, that House race, you've got Congressional District 1, which is Diana DeGette's seat. She's gotten a primary once again. This is not one of the high-profile primaries. She's had a couple recently, and she fended them off. A CU Regent race that has a primary in Congressional District 1, Johnny Wynn and Wanda James. I don't know enough intelligently to give you the short version of their candidacies, but it's really that House District 6. The Democrats have managed to avoid the infighting for many of the races. But that House District 6 will reveal. It's Katie March versus Elizabeth Epps. Katie March was worked in the House Speaker's office for the last 3 House Speakers, currently Alec Garnett. Elizabeth Epps is a social activist. She helps, she's most well known, I think, for raising funds to bail people out of jail when it's like a $50 bail that they can't even afford. This will indicate whoever wins. I know it's just a small section of Denver, but if Elizabeth Epps were to win, that would add another very far left name to the roster of Democrats at the State House, where you could start to see wildly left ideas like, hey, we should start closing jails. Hey, we should start limiting what a police department can do, like that type of legislation. Whereas Katie March is more of your traditional, closer to the center than where Epps is, Democrat. That's the one Democratic race that seems to be most watchable.
Polls close at what time on Tuesday? Any details about when also we can expect some of those results to come in on Tuesday?
7 o'clock on June 28th, so Tuesday, June 28th. You need your ballot into the clerk, so hand deliver it, drop it off. By now it's too late to put it in the mail. Don't trust that it will get there in time if you put it in the mail now. Nothing against the mail service, but they always like to say give it at least 8 days before the election, and we're beyond that. So hand deliver it, vote in person if you feel like, using a touch screen, or fill out your ballot and hand it right in. So that's 7 o'clock. Results, I know many of these places, if you vote early, and I encourage voting, at least a day or two early, so that you got it out of the way. But these counties are processing ballots as they receive them. They just haven't calculated them. And so at 7 o'clock, they hit a button, and it's like, all these ballots received as of Monday, we're going to count right now. And so we'll get that first batch of numbers right away, maybe a minute or two after 7. And then it slows down after a while, because places like Denver only update every 90 minutes. Other counties will update as they get it. But we'll have a continuous count on Tuesday.
And we'll be also, by the way, cutting in on 9 News. We'll have Marshall, you and I will be doing plenty of stuff on 9 News Plus here as well. So be sure to tune on in to us here on 9 News Plus on election night on June the 28th. Any final thoughts about the primary, what to look for?
I mean, our themes that we'll be looking at Tuesday is which candidates are leading and what does that mean for what the electorate wants. If you've got Tina Peters running for Secretary of State winning, if you've got Ron Hanks winning, if you have Greg Lopez winning, that suggests that the voters who are voting in the primary are okay with that way far thinking. But if your more traditional candidates win, Pam Anderson for Secretary of State, Joe O'Dea for Senate, and Heidi Ganahl for governor, and I know I'm leaving out Congressional District 8 candidates in this, but if those are your more traditional candidates that win, that says you've got more what you're used to races between the Democrat and a Republican versus a Democrat and like the conspiracy thought process.
All right, so plenty on the line coming up here on Tuesday night. Again, we'll have those results in somewhere around 7 p.m. on Tuesday night. So, of course, we'll have those latest for you on 9 News and here on 9 News Plus. So be sure to tune on in. Marshall, thanks so much for your time here on 9 News Plus.
Sure.